Hey everybody. As stated already, my name is Phoenix, also known as Mohawk, and I've been doing a lot of harm reduction work in what started in nightlife, but I've been kind of like branching out a lot more since I started my work 10 years ago now. Um, I am a transgender harm reduction advocate and activist, and I'll go a little bit more into why that's more relevant later. But yeah, as I mentioned, I started in nightlife, and it's the need for harm reduction has kind of evolved into addressing more than just like doing harm reduction in nightlife spaces, but all of the various kinds of people who are using substances that participate in nightlife, which spans outside of spaces that may host nightlife events and social gatherings. And specifically starting to um, focus in on the underserved communities that inhabit these spaces and what their specific needs are as far as their types of drug use, because there's been a lot of sort of almost treating these demographics differently than folks who might be street homeless, for example, and seeing that type of drug use and that type of population as a completely separate demographic than people who are doing drugs in a quote unquote recreational context at parties when actually there is a lot of overlap there. So that's really kind of like where I've been able to start, but then also evolve my work to address kind of the needs of both. Um, so I want to like sort of start um, my, I guess, origin story with a meme that I actually saw online about a week ago, and I think it perfectly describes um, how I do this work. And it was basically just a photo of somebody who just looked, I don't know, kind of miserable in a sense, just like straight face. And it said, "What does it look like I do for a living?" And then someone responded, "Whatever it takes." So that's what I'm doing in harm reduction is whatever it takes to make sure that, to the best of my ability, these needs are addressed, or at least um, these needs are kind of like just highlighted because I think that it gets overlooked a lot. So I actually started, and it's exciting to me to see these chill out pamphlets actually because it says a raver's guide. So I'm a raver, or at least I was, um, getting a little older, a little bit more challenging these days to keep up with that. But I started as, a raver, so I engaged in a lot of drug use in raves and, recreational context, having fun, whatever. And as a person who uses drugs and was just, getting whatever I could get to enhance my experience at parties, it started to occur to me in my own personal experiences, like, why does this feel a little bit different each time? Or, sometimes it feels the same, sometimes it doesn't. What's going on with this drug supply? And as I started to ask these questions, um, I get curious. So, like, I'm, kind of like a science nerd in a way. Like, my background's in technology and like computer science and stuff, but I do, like to dabble in like learning about other things as well. So I, started to just look around online, just, look up access to tablets or whatever, and realize that, in the drug supply that there are a lot of things that are sold as one thing and might contain something completely different or a combination of different things. And in my youth, that was actually just like, oh, sweet, more drugs to try. So it was not threatening to me at all at first, until I realized, oh, this could have, various different effects on people, and this is what everyone here is engaging in some context. They may be mixing it with alcohol, they may be mixing it with their prescribed medications or unprescribed medications that they're using in a context like it would be prescribed, and just all sorts of various different interactions that could be happening. Um, and you could see, overdose, or you could just see people who were not, able to, they were having, certain unintended consequences from engaging in this type of drug use. And the idea is that, like, we're just we're just trying to get through the day, the night. We're all trying to have fun or enhance our experiences in one way or another. And I always say that no one's doing drugs to have a bad time. So I'm really invested in making sure that people have the information so that they can have the best time, and in some way be adding like positivity in their life with their drug use. Um, so actually, like the first I guess sort of harm reduction initiative that I started after doing a lot of just discussing with people, kind of like, why aren't these conversations happening? Like, if we are aware that the drug supply might not be reliable, um, then what's going on? Why is this not really being talked about? Why are there's no education around this? Why are people just not even aware that they maybe even engaging in drug selling and not realizing that they don't have the product they say they have? And I started to hear about a service called Dance Safe, which is a nightlife harm reduction organization in the U.S. And um, so, at the time, there wasn't a lot. This was 2012 at this point. So 2012, social media was still sort of in its infancy as far as being used in a way that could be more commercialized, or a conduit for spreading information, like well beyond maybe your immediate community or networks. Um, and since I had a background in computer science, I was like, I'm going to just use the internet. There's like some websites here and stuff, but it seems like if you don't know about it, or you don't think to like search for these things, then you just don't know. So what I decided to do at the time was just like code up a bunch of stuff that allowed me to use things like Twitter, Instagram, and just constantly like just churn out any information that I could around drugs, anything that might be coming up in the supply. We have a service in based out of California, called drugsdata.org, that is a lab that is it's like a DEA licensed lab that's allowed to accept samples via mail, and they have the GCMS technology to then analyze those substances and give you a full breakdown of any psychoactive substances that are there. And that was just a website just living there. It had been there since like 2002. And I'll use a lot of that information just to underscore, like, hey, there are these things out there floating around that just kind of look like you know tablets or uh, capsules full of some powder, but actually it's containing all these other things. And sometimes like gamify uh, some of what I would put out there, where it's like, hey, if you're looking at this capsule filled with white powder, can you guess what it is? And that would kind of be my way to trick people into engaging with my content, because everyone swore they could identify by eye what the drug was, and they were always very wrong. Sometimes I would really throw them off by just posting a capsule of like a supplement or something. So like it was a good way to start to just put into people's minds that, hey, like this is nowhere what you think it is. You're not as smart as you think you are about this stuff, and maybe you should be asking more questions. And this was before I even was aware that you could get like kits, that you can use at home to start to analyze some of the substances to like a small degree, not with um, detail and accuracy necessarily, but at least if you absolutely had something completely different than what you thought, it was enough information for a lot of people. And so, like, from there, I was like, I need to start taking this in person, because I actually, because I was an active, an avid raver, I would I would be traveling all over the country, going to different parties, and I had these like business cards and things that just tell people about the resources and the work that I was doing. I also would bring in a lot of supplements and things because a lot of people are just straight up malnourished. They're partying for days, they're binging, and doing all these things. So I'd also bring a giant pharmacopoeia with me in order to help rehydrate and replenish people who may have been using amphetamines or just drugs, alcohol, things all weekend, all night, whatever, and just kind of helping people think about um, you know harm reduction in that context, even if we didn't do any sort of analysis or anything to know about what was in their drugs. And so the first time that I was able to try to set up a booth, which is kind of like what Dance Safe does, they usually have an informational booth they'll set up at a festival, at a party or whatever, with lots of resources similar to this that will tell you about the different effects of various drugs and kind of some things to be cautious about. Um, and this is before I was more formally involved with Dance Safe, so it's just kind of me winging it with some things. Um, the event actually very quickly got shut down by the police, and in New York, the NYPD is a massive force. It's very difficult to do a lot of work in general, just any work, even just being a nightlife promoter, it can be very difficult to get what you need to set up events legally. So when there were all these illegal events, a lot of times it would be targeted and shut down, especially since NYPD and the drug task forces that existed would just seek these spaces out and just make it their hobby to shut all this stuff down and make arrests because they know the drugs are there. But the party was shut down fairly quickly, within an hour or so of it opening. And I had all this stuff. I had brought, I don't know, I had 300 gallons of water. So I just had all these water bottles and just all the stuff that I had brought in, and I had just used all of my own money to just get these resources. And since there was no way to really distribute it now that the party had been shut down, and everybody's leaving the venue, police is kicking everybody out. I was just well, there are a lot of people already on drugs here. I could see they took their drugs, they're peaking and whatnot, and I'm definitely not taking all of the stuff back up 6 flights of stairs to my apartment. So I just stood on the curb handing out water to everybody, and everyone, it's oh, great, perfect, Jesus. And the cops were just so pissed. They were so pissed that I was doing this, and they were threatening me and yelling at me to get off the street, get off the corner, and to move. And I was okay, I mean, I'm not breaking any laws here. And also, your police cars have boxed in my car, so I can't go anywhere until you all leave. And they never moved, so I sat there and I gave away all of the water, as well as a number of free pairs of rave pants that I couldn't fit anymore. And went on my merry way. That was my first time trying to set up harm reduction in a nightlife space. And from there, I was okay, this is going to be very challenging. I need to somehow continue to legitimize this work so that it's recognized and respected and adopted in a lot more spaces. So then, later in the year, I got more formally involved with Dance Safe and doing the work and set up the Dance Safe chapter in New York, and led that for the last 9 years or so. And even though it was a sort of a branch of Dance Safe, all the chapters of Dance Safe are just volunteers in their local communities, so everybody kind of has a different way of doing stuff, or there might be different needs or different challenges in each community. But like I said, New York City is just its own beast. You're dealing with a very large police force who targets these communities and these people, people who use drugs, it's very easy for them, to get funding and do this type of stuff, even though it's like not helpful for anybody. It's a complete waste of, taxpayer dollars. Um, but, it makes them look important, like they're doing things to arrest a lot of people who are just, minding their own business, having a good time. Um, but yeah, so, that's kind of where I started. And, it's only I've only gotten bolder over the years, just pushing the envelope and seeing what I can get away with. Especially since a lot of times it was just kind of me taking the reins and being like, yeah, let's just try this, and if anyone's down to like do this with me, like let's go. So that's kind of been, how we were doing it in this sort of like almost renegade like format, which is where the rebel education has come from. Like I just kind of do what I want. No one can ever tell me no. If they tell me no, I'm going to do it anyway. So, I would just bring things into spaces a lot of times, even if it what hadn't been approved, and just to show that this can work and it's going to help people, and there's going to be no consequence to you as the person hosting this event. Like just to keep kind of shining a positive light on why this is necessary, because a lot of people would be in denial and reject it because they just have all these preconceived notions about what this says about their event or what could happen. Um, Especially since in the US, we have the RAVE Act, which is sort of a unique piece of legislation that had been adopted in 2004, I believe it was. That basically said that any space, it was like sort of an extension on our crack house statute, which basically says like if you have a space that allows people to use drugs in this illicit manner, then there could be a lot of penalties. Um, and so, because of that, a lot of people are very scared that even something as simple as an area where people can cool down, relax, take breaks, free water, things that could be seen as enabling or promoting or condoning drug use, uh, could essentially, lead to legal punishment. And that could be anything from fines, jail time, losing their venues or licenses, or whatever. Although what we've seen over this entire time is that no one's actually been prosecuted under that at all, but people don't know that. So doing this work had been very challenging and very risky, but I had been willing to just to see what happens. I mean, I kind of see it as like, well, I'm doing illegal stuff anyway, so at least if this is something that's good, if something good can come out of this, then it's worth that risk. And so I guess sort of fast forward to more recent years, and kind of like I guess how I ended up here today is in 2019, as we started to see a lot of fentanyl and things like that cropping up in our drug supply, especially for people who use opiates, people who might use illicitly manufactured pharmaceuticals. Um, and this overdose crisis was starting to become even more critical. The tools that we had been using and a lot of the strategies that we had been using just weren't sufficient. Using the little at-home test kits and stuff was okay, but it just wasn't enough if you needed further analysis, especially for something like fentanyl, which is very potent and highly active in extremely small, minute amounts that wouldn't be detected otherwise. And so, organizations such as the Loop out here in the UK were, experimenting with these spectrometers and things, and we were slowly starting to adopt the same technology in the US. But a lot of this technology is pretty much locked up in institutions and labs and hospitals and research facilities, and It's a very expensive piece of equipment that usually would require someone to have like a biochemistry background to even operate. And I was just like, fuck that. I'm gonna figure out how to get one of these. So in 2019, I actually, flew out to Chicago. In Chicago, there is an organization called the Chicago Recovery Alliance that has, I believe, three of the spectrometers that are used to do mobile drug checking. And I said, can I borrow one of these? Can you show me how to use it? And can I borrow one of these that maybe you won't need for about a week? And there I met Nigel, lovely Nigel, um, who took an interest in what I was doing. And so with that spectrometer that I was able to then bring back to New York, I ran basically a drug checking laboratory out of my apartment for the week of Halloween in 2019, and was just like, well, if I can pull this off, this will be a huge milestone. So just in my living room, my small little New York City apartment, nothing fancy, set up a space for people to do drug checking. I had done a bit of traveling around Europe, and I had done some collaboration with groups in Canada who, in my eyes, are miles ahead of anything we're able to do in the US. They were already using these spectrometers and things on site, and had already been given all sorts of funding from governments and things, and were basically given like opportunities and clearance to be able to, in a very large scale, perform this type of drug checking in very large spaces where people are enjoying substances. And so I was already aware that this is sort of something that we could take advantage of. So I was able to, run hundreds of tests, just doing this out of my living room, telling everybody that I've got this machine. And even though I was not able to bring the machine into a specific party that was happening that weekend, they told us, like, well, if you could still somehow do drug checking for this party, just do it. So I had flown someone out from LA to help me operate the spectrometer when I was not there, and we just Ubered back and forth samples to and from the party in my apartment to do drug checking. And it was successful, and we were able to text and do all these things and communicate and still be able to give people this information. And so to circle back to the transgender community, everything, it's just that there are a lot of people who are in these spaces, especially when you look outside of large festival contexts that are really expensive and cost prohibitive for a lot of people, that are still engaging in this type of drug use. And they're also engaging in the same type of drug use in many cases that people might see with street homeless populations of methamphetamine or crack or opioids, smoking, injecting, and all these other higher risk and vulnerable types of drug use. And so I realized that these larger organizations are just not able to address that if they're only setting this up in these large festival and party contexts that are more commercial. So I've kind of unaffiliated myself in a way so that I can operate in an individual context and try to provide this for groups of people who otherwise would not have access to any of this technology. And before I hand the mic over to Lee, I was able to, there's a fund in New York called the David Prize that basically will give a New Yorker $200,000 to do whatever they want to help New York City. And unfortunately, I didn't win the $200,000, but two of the people in the room who were basically judging my presentation had expressed to me that they had, recovered from chaotic drug use. And so one of those people decided that they were going to buy me a spectrometer. So that, so that paper, So that paperwork got signed this week, and a spectrometer will be on the way. And again, I'm going to do whatever it takes. I don't have any other money right now to try to run a DIY program. But I was like, well, I've got the spectrometer, and I've done wild things to accomplish things in the past. So I'm hoping that, now that I've sort of got a reputation for doing this, people will, support and take notice. And right now I'm actually crowdfunding just so that people, can support this initiative happening, because it's as an individual, especially in the US, you just can't really get money for this. It's really hard to get money for it as an organization, even harder, if not impossible, to get as an individual. But I feel like I have to work in this sort of outside of a institutional context or incorporated contexts to really make sure that I'm addressing these almost, I say fringe, but it's not really fringe. Like, this is a lot of people. This is a lot of people who are not either on the street getting addressed by, the existing harm reduction organizations with the, syringe service programs and all of that, or the people who get to, go to whatever massive events, Electric Daisy Carnival or whatever, So there's a lot of people who this is going to help. I mean, there are people that are like me, they are people of color, they are lower income, they, have all these different marginalizations and often are at a really great risk, especially considering that statistically, marginalized populations like Black and brown people, LGBTQ people have higher rates of drug use. And with that, I mean, I still see a lot of overdose and just kind of issues with the nature of the drug supply and everything in these communities where I exist, where I spend my time, that are my peers, and my community. So with that, I will hand it over to you.